Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk with Renisha, the podcast that aims to inspire, empower, and encourage you as I talk with real people on their journeys. Today, of course, you already know we have an amazing guest. She's hailing all the way from California. She is a pediatric nurse practitioner in developmental and behavioral pediatrics. She's also the host of a podcast called Moms Changing the World, and she's also a parent coach. Please welcome to the show, Miss Akua Walker. Hi,
Hello,
Akua. Welcome to
hello.
Real Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is so great to have you here because you have such an interesting career and field that we're going to dive into in a few minutes. But just,
Yes.
another podcaster who is encouraging and wanting to change the world. I am just so in awe of that everybody else who's doing this has that same kind of vision. So we'll, of
Mm,
course, dive into that later on as well, also. So again,
absolutely.
very interesting and amazing career that you have, an occupation that you have. Tell us a
Yeah,
little bit about it and how did you begin this journey?
absolutely. So, my work in the clinic is as a pediatric nurse practitioner, and the journey to it is kind of interesting in that even as a young child, I was interested in kind of how we grow up, how we change. I'm the oldest of three, and so I grew up with my sister, but we had a baby brother come along when I was about 7, 8 years old. And so that was the first time that I had a kind of an up close view, front row seat of development, right? So we, my parents bring this like tiny, helpless newborn into the house. He can't do anything but cry, and make a mess, wake us up in the middle of the night. But
Mm-hmm.
he was just such a delight, and I got to see him transform. And just seeing how he could start to hold up his head and all the new things that he could do, because then he could start to move and crawl around and then start to walk and talk. And I was just like, this is so amazing. And we would have magazines come to the house, Parent Magazine, Parent Plus, like just different things, and I would just grab them. And as soon as I could kind of read and understand, I was like reading about like what's going to come next for his development. And they had stuff in there about like what I was doing as a tween and a teen. And I was like, wait, somebody out there knows what's happening in our house? Like what is
Right.
going on here, right? And then it started to click. Okay, these are patterns. Like this is not the first time that this is happening. It's like maybe the first time I'm seeing it, right? And
Yes.
aware of it. But I just can remember from a young age just being fascinated by children,
Wow.
babysitting, just loving, the youthfulness and their energy, even as I got older. And it was just very natural as an older sister for me to kind of play in that role. So I knew that I wanted to, definitely do something around children and development. I also liked the health field and, looked
Mm-hmm.
at, different ways, to be involved there as me as a doctor. But then I also, by the time I got to school, got hooked into psychology and
Mm-hmm.
the mental health process that one would go through, right, from developing and having more like fantasy kinds of thinking as a young child into more, concrete and abstract ways of thinking. So the psychological and developmental impact, right, in our
Wow.
podcast interview that we connected with before, we were just talking about how what we go through and the way that we're raised
Yes.
affects everything else as we
Mm.
become an adult and we settle into our own identity and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. And so I, after college, went to work in a health system that allowed me to be a clinical health educator because I also like teaching and educating people.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
So I was in that role, and in that role, I was able to work on a team with the doctors, the nurses, the psychologists, the dietitians, because I loved food too. So I'm like, well, maybe I'll do that. The nurse case managers. I was like, well, maybe I'll do that. I I loved it all, and I loved aspects of what all of them got to do. And the longer I was with it, the more I saw that the nurse practitioner got to do a little bit of everything. She got to do the medical part. She got to do
Yes.
the bedside manner part. staying with and educating and really
Mm-hmm.
nurturing people through the process of their health. She was, oftentimes the confidant, right? They would be honest and do the mental health
Mm-hmm.
support. There was,
Yes.
case management often involved if you stayed with the family over time.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about diet and exercise, all the lifestyle things. So I decided to go back to school to become a nurse practitioner, so that in my way I could kind of do a little bit of everything that was
Wow.
involved with that, and pediatrics, of course, to get back to the child development aspect of that. So, the specialty that I ended up in, which is
Mm-hmm.
development and behavior, I didn't even really know was its own specialty. It's a newer
Mm-hmm.
specialty because
Mm-hmm.
I had, known about things like Down syndrome. I'd heard about syndromes growing up, and I, would meet a person or two that had, these things going on. But it was not until I was in school and we did more around psychiatry and mental health
Yes.
and pediatric kind of mental health that things like autism and ADHD
Mm-hmm.
started to become more and more
Mm-hmm.
in the forefront. And so
Mm-hmm.
my first working position was actually half psychiatry, half development. And I thought, oh, that would be a good combination, because I knew I didn't want to do all psychiatry because, again, I'm interested in all the different things. But
Mm-hmm.
I knew the mental health medications because I had worked inpatient with adults around mental health, crisis. And so it was a very natural bridge to do both and to learn about this developmental and behavioral, carve out, which is all really about neurodiversity, which is the
Mm-hmm.
term that we use now, which just describes, it's often the hidden conditions that we often don't see necessarily on the outside. Like we might see someone
Mm-hmm.
who's blind, or we might see somebody on crutches, right? But it's
Correct.
impacting everything about their life. And it can make things quite challenging to develop
Mm-hmm.
in a way that might not be the traditional, trajectory of development that we might read about in a magazine or a book. And so it's been just really exciting to be able to come alongside families from the beginning of that process
Mm-hmm.
and to really be, part of the team in supporting their child's development.
Wow. So it's as if you were groomed for this role. Oh my gosh, I'm listening to you like, because most of us, like I said, we don't even know what we want to do when we grow up. And
Mhm,
here you are, even
mhm.
from a very young age, had a
Yeah,
special interest
yeah,
in not necessarily knowing exactly what it's going to be, but definitely
right.
that definitely piqued your interest at a very, very young age.
Yeah,
This is awesome. So you have
yeah.
the clinical aspect, you have the psychology aspect, all of it in combination. It's like you're a well-rounded practitioner, which is great. I love that for
Yeah,
you. Now,
yeah,
do you
thank you.
mainly work with children with autism on the autism spectrum, Asperger's, all
Mhm,
of that kind of stuff?
mhm.
Tell us a little bit about your work with those particular
Sure,
children
sure.
population.
Yeah, so children often will come to us as young as 2 or 3 years old. And the main thing they come to us with is speech delay. So that's one of our biggest, early flags
Mm,
that something
mm-hmm,
is, non-traditional, about the developmental path that the child is on. And there can be
mm-hmm,
other delays as well, whether it's motor delay or fine motor delay, walking, self-care delay, potty training. There can be other things mixed in there too,
mm-hmm,
but usually the big one is speech delay. And then sometimes there's also social challenges, maybe not as interested in playing with other kids, or not as interested in making eye contact when they're engaging, things like that. And so for our young children that come to us, those are the kinds of um, labels, or those are the kinds of questions that their pediatrician will send them to. And parents, of course, now are, well connected to the internet and well connected
yes.
to, right, others in the community who also have a lot of these same delays and questions. And so then we help sort out, is this just a speech delay where everything else is kind of falling into place and they don't have some of the social emotional things that also
Mm-hmm,
come along with autism, or
mm-hmm,
repetitive and kind of restricted interest and behavior patterns. And so we help sort out, is this more? Is
mm-hmm.
a speech delay, or is this more? than just a speech delay, which it can often be
Mhm.
fall into the diagnosis of autism. And then
Mhm.
for older children that come to us, school age, oftentimes
Mhm.
kindergarten, first, second grade, they might be coming because they've got so much energy that they're struggling to settle down
Mhm.
for our kind of
Mhm.
traditional school model, right? In the
Yes.
classroom, you have to sit in your chair and then you do this and then you do that, right? And
Correct.
not all kids kind of jive with that. And so based on the kind of early feedback from teachers and
Mhm.
parents, and then the pediatrician, they will come to us with questions around attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD for
Mhm.
short. And so that's another big chunk of the kids who come to us. And then the last big chunk is they might come in the elementary years or maybe even high school years, and they're
Mm.
struggling with mental health. So they're anxious, they're
Mhm.
depressed. They
Mhm.
might be doing amazing and incredible in school, but they're struggling in a variety of other ways. So we take the time to understand and sort out, well, when did this start? Were there early signs of this, or are there
Mhm.
patterns in
Mhm.
the early years, or is this brand new? And this is a good point to say that the pandemic really pushed a
Oh,
lot of this forward, right? So
yes.
over the last 4 years,
Yes.
it's been, yeah, quite the thing where a lot of kids were maybe on the edge or on the cusp, and they were
Mhm.
managing, before the pandemic happened. And then we were pushed into this upside down world where we had to stay home. We were doing school
Mhm.
online, everything was online, couldn't barely leave the house.
Yes.
Didn't know when
Yes.
we were going to return back to school and in person. And so that definitely, did not help this path that a lot of
Mhm.
kids now found themselves anxious and depressed and
Yes.
struggling to reconnect even after it was time to go back. It wasn't like, we're going to just
Mhm.
instantly have everything back the way it was. It, as you
Mhm.
know, was a gradual process and had so many
Mhm.
layers and so many after effects that we're
Mhm.
still dealing with today.
Correct. I'm so glad that you emphasized the pandemic and the effects of that because children and adults are still struggling to get back to what they had before. I had a young adult on, and she's saying, even in college, that she's still struggling to connect with people because that disconnect
Mm,
was so real
mm,
for them. You know,
yes.
school online, that was something that was unheard of.
Yeah.
Not being around their peers, not engaging and
Every day.
interacting. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
And we, as an adult, I loved being at home, and I work from home, so I didn't even think about it
Think
from that
about it. Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
But the children and the young people, the young adult that had to go through this, it was a
Yeah.
huge, huge ordeal for them.
Yeah.
And we're seeing now, 4 years later, or after the
Yeah.
fact, post-pandemic, the
Right.
issues and the problems that arise from just the pandemic alone. Oh my
Right.
gosh. So it's
Yeah.
incredible. The anxiety,
Yes.
the depression, the social
Yes.
phobias, even. A lot
Right.
of kids don't even know how to interact. Some of them
Right.
were in school the entire time. So they don't
Right.
even know how to go out there now in the real world, in the real classroom. And how do I make friends? So I think we'll
Right.
see, even in the near future, more
Right.
after effects
Right.
of the pandemic.
Right. Right.
Excuse me. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think one statistic is that, maybe I think 8 years is what it's kind of the gonna take to kind of go through the whole cycle of the after effects. 8 to 10 years. I know in the beginning I thought, okay, maybe 1 or 2 years was what I was thinking and hoping, right? And then
wow.
we'll, yeah, we kind of be back to normal. But yeah, I was blown away and then kind of
Wow.
reassured that children too are quite resilient. So there
Correct.
are a lot of children and families who weren't even phased by a lot of this, right? Because they're so resilient. And
Yes.
that is one of the beautiful things about children. And yeah, socialization is such a huge part of
Mhm.
development, right? And
Correct.
in the beginning, when
Correct.
a baby or an infant, you just need your
Mhm.
small world with your family in your house, and that's fine. But
Mhm.
as your world begins to grow and bloom, right? And you're going
Mhm.
out and you're going to
Mhm.
the park and you're going to the store and going to church and just the different places and in
Yes.
school. And
Yes.
there's so much to development that happens outside the home. And
Correct.
socialization is a huge part of the developmental experience. And so to have that shifted and
Mhm,
taken away and then back
mhm,
and then not back, and all of that was quite challenging for children. And then of course they were in homes with
mhm.
parents, right? We were talking about how children don't raise themselves, right? And they're not in a vacuum.
That's right.
And
Exactly.
so, yeah, so parents were dealing with what they were dealing with
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
that time as well. And so a lot of parents were struggling, right, to work,
Correct.
to pay the bills, to
Mhm,
figure out what was next, and to be the teacher, and
mhm,
to, be the cook and the
mhm.
chef, and to do all of those things.
Oh,
And so it was quite a time for parents. And as we know,
correct.
children, are impacted by what happens,
Yes.
to their parents and what happens in the home. So yeah,
Interesting, but yes, so real,
so
so
real.
real.
Absolutely.
And like I said, as time goes by, I think we're going to get more statistics on the
Right.
impact what the pandemic has done
Right.
to from babies up to adults, because we all
Absolutely.
struggled in some way, shape, or form because of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely anxiety after the well, even through and after, a lot of anxiety came to me because it was a time to be anxious. It's not a time in the world. It was a
Right.
time to be anxious for a lot of people. So
Right.
that's great work in seeing that. Tell us a little bit about your parent coaching. You're a
Sure.
parent coach
Sure.
for parents. Just a little bit
That's
about
right.
that. And that seems very
Yes.
impactful as well.
It has been amazing. Yeah,
Awesome.
so out of this time, right, we kind of were suddenly shut down, and there was a lot of, yeah, emotional, angst and questions. And I working with families saw and knew, how much challenge that parents were under. And in my work, I had this interesting view where I could see, that clinically oftentimes we'll give a diagnosis of, autism or ADHD, and then we refer the children to, get their therapies, right? Occupational therapy, speech therapy, behavior therapy, and the children get the therapy. But the parents would come back and say, well, what about me? Like, well, what do I do, right? When the therapist isn't
Mhm,
there, or what do I say? Like when
mhm,
the speech therapist isn't there, how do, what about me? And so I
mhm,
could see this very interesting gap in what was available for parents and what
mhm,
they needed. And then
mhm,
me, as well as a parent, I was also integrating and figuring out, the difference between all that we read and study and learn in the books, right?
mhm,
And the
mhm,
reality, as we said
mhm.
earlier, the realness
Correct.
of our children in our homes every single
Mhm.
day, right? Before the pandemic and after.
Sure.
And so, one thing I say is that I thought I was ready. I thought I knew. I had read the books. I had studied the developmental paths. I thought I was ready. And, my kids came and they said, we didn't read those books. Like, here I am. Like, like take me for what I am. Right. And
Yes,
before
yes.
that, I was like, I was a real believer in the whole nature versus nurture debate, right?
Hmm.
That's at the crux of development. Is it, are kids born
Yes.
that way? Or do we like have full control to nurture them into who we want them to be? And I was in that full development, like we can nurture them. And then my children helped me to see, oh, we come with so much of who we are. God has made us,
Hmm.
fearfully and wonderfully,
Yes.
for a specific calling and purpose. And
Hmm.
it's like we as parents then get to just nurture and be kind
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
involved in this
Yes.
process where, they are quite, yeah, they're quite designed and
I'm sure.
programmed, right? And just like they have their personality and they have their interests and they have their ways of wanting to do things. And so
Yes.
I was
Yes.
integrating and having to figure all of those things out myself. And so in that process, had to really like, kind of boil down, okay, this is what all the parenting books say, but what does it look like, for real in our homes?
Hmm.
And so that brought me to a place where I knew we
Hmm.
had to figure out this juggle, right, of
Hmm.
life and
Hmm.
work and stress and children and development, and find a way to be calm in all of it. Because it's so
Yes.
easy to be overwhelmed and to be yelling and, threatening and bribing and doing all of those things. And we
Mhm.
know that those things don't work when it comes to
Correct.
nurturing, the next generation of world changers, right? We have to,
Correct.
well, I knew there had to be a better way. And so that's where Be Calm came into the picture.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but what I'm hearing from
Sure.
you is support group for moms,
Mhm.
support groups for women and mothers who are going through the situation with kids who are on that neurodiversity, spectrum. Because
Yes.
there should be a support group for quote unquote everything, pretty much, right? There
Right.
should be
Right.
one. And you are all alone. If you're probably one of the parents in your schools whose child, one of the few
Yeah.
example, whose
Yeah.
child might be on the spectrum,
Right.
how do you support not only your child, but you yourself need support? So I love that it's like a
Exactly.
support group for moms.
Exactly.
Um, I have a client who was a new mom, and she said, I have a support group, a new mom support group in my neighborhood. And I'm just like,
Mm,
wow,
that's awesome.
that's a thing. Love
Yes.
it,
Yes.
right? She's new to
Yes.
this. She has no clue what she's doing because, like you said, here's the manual. Once you do this here and they're doing whatever they're doing, everything in that manual is like, oh, this doesn't really work. This is the real life. How do I deal with this child?
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
hence, these support groups that moms and dads too,
Yeah,
right? I heard a lot
too.
about the moms.
Yeah.
Dads need
Can't
support
forget the
too.
dads. Yeah.
We can't forget
Yeah.
the dads, but we know
Yeah.
how we as women, we know how we are,
Yes.
right? And we know
Yes.
we will find a support group for us if we need
Right.
to. Dads are not as
Mm,
pushy as we are, but
mm.
dads also need support group for your spectrum of kids as well. They need that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, those early mom groups, new mom groups, they were a lifeline. When I first
Mm,
had, my girls and I was, becoming a mother and like having to, shift from being a clinician, right, to being an actual mom of my own
right.
child and my own children. And so to have other parent moms primarily in that sometimes they would bring their moms or their grandmas in the circle sometimes and
Mm,
aunties, whoever was the support, was
yes.
invited to be there. And we could, with children born around the same time, we could
Yes.
help each other. And it was nice to have friends and with older children and all of those levels
Yes.
in it. But when they were like right in that same cohort, it was
Mhm.
really special because they were going through the same things that I was going through as a mom and as a parent. So yeah, some of those are moms that I met through there are still friends today. And my
Oh,
kids are
wonderful.
teenagers, teens and tweens. So it's incredible
Yes.
what, going through that together with other moms can do for for your sanity, right?
Yes,
And for your
absolutely.
community, right? And your circle of support and just care for one another over the years after that.
I love it. We need support at every level.
Do.
And no matter what we're going through, like I said, there should always be a support group that we can go and feel that, okay, it's not just me.
Yeah.
Other moms are going through this too. I don't have to feel like I'm a bad mom because I don't know what to do. Other moms are in the same exact space as I am, and they're thriving, they're
Exactly.
fine to me, right? Because I need to see
Exactly.
that as well. So I just love that there is that setup, and you're a part of that as well. I think that's
Yes.
absolutely
Yes.
amazing. So
Yeah.
you mentioned be calm. I love that.
Yes.
Tell us more what some of these acronyms stands for and exactly what that
Sure.
is about.
Sure, sure. So I knew I needed a simple way to kind of bring together all the different tools and resources that are out there that, that have evidence behind them to show that they support, nurturing children who also are, in a healthy developmental space, right?
Mhm.
Socially, emotionally aware and nurturing and they feel heard and they feel connected. And
Mm,
so the Be Calm is a step-by-step kind of reminder, right, of how to do some of the things that help, especially in the heat of the moment. So that's
mhm.
where my focus, has been because oftentimes it's in those heated moments that kind of everything comes out and everything
Yes.
gets flared. So, one example that stands out is, we were rushing to get ready for school one day and the little ones were in preschool at that time and I had to get to work on time and we had to get
Mhm,
all our stuff together and so I'm calling the
mhm.
kids, they're dressed and they're ready, but my youngest is fascinated by this little doll, this little toy that she's going to take to school. I think it's like a show and tell or something. And so
Okay.
she's just so into this toy and she's talking about it and she's showing it and she's waving it around, but it is slowing us down, right? And so you can imagine
Yes,
what's
yes.
happening is I'm trying to grab things. I'm looking at the clock. We're going to be late. There's going to be patients waiting and I'm not going to be there. And I have to, the drops offs. And so you can
Yes,
imagine the temperature, in the house
yes,
rising as well as
yes.
the volume, right? And finally, she comes over and she says something about the doll and the toy, and I just hit my limit. I grabbed it and I
Oh,
chucked it
oh,
across the room.
yes, yes, yes. That's
Just
real. That's for
that's
real.
it was
Hmm.
totally
That's
real.
real.
And we
Hmm.
all hear it bam so loud that I'm like sure that something, I broke the window or so. I thought I
Oh
had
my
broken
God.
many things. And
Yes,
and we're all just in just shock because my kids are also like, wait, what just happened?
yes.
And we
Hmm.
I go and I get the toy and it's like broken in like three or
Oh,
four pieces. And the little one is like devastated and I am mortified. I'm embarrassed that I had had a mommy tantrum right
yes.
in the heat of that moment. And so I knew that, something had to give in all of that. And I
Hmm.
delved into and found that that mindfulness kind of based stress reduction
Hmm.
was where I could manage my own emotions and understand my own feelings because that
Yes.
was kind of negatively impacting how I was responding to my own children. And I was
Yes.
also having physical pains with all of it, right? When we hold and bottle up our
Hmm.
stress, right, it
Hmm.
comes out
Yes.
some way, right? And
Yes.
so
Absolutely.
I knew that something had to give. And so in developing my own mindfulness practices around, breathing, around slowing down, around meditation and prayer, I
Hmm.
was already praying. And so finding out a way to, balance those things
Yes.
helped ground and shift my whole way of responding, to my children. So the B in Be Calm, the first letter is to breathe. And it really
Mm.
is that pause button that we all need because,
Yes.
our children are going to press every button that we have. And people in our
Oh,
lives, even if you don't
yes.
have children, this,
Yes.
the relationships, marriage,
Hmm.
family, friends, they
Yes.
will, they will, they will press the buttons
Hmm.
and
Absolutely.
the triggers. And if we don't have a way of responding,
Hmm.
choosing our respond and we just go for the knee-jerk reaction, right? We're going to go for usually the things that are in our fight and flight mode. We're going to
Absolutely.
activate that kind of that sympathetic side of our system, which is
Hmm.
meant for survival. So whether the
Yes.
threat that we see is real,
Hmm.
an actual threat, a bear or a tiger, or it's perceived, right? Somebody says something, mean to us and we perceive that we're threatened.
Yes.
That system is activated and
Yes.
we, go into that mode. But a powerful tool,
Hmm.
pausing and taking
Breathe.
a breath, yeah, can actually kind of arrest that system and bring us more into the rest, and digest side of that equation. So that's where
Yeah.
doing breath work with the family myself, right, first, and
Right.
then as a foundation for the families that I support,
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
made that difference. So
Wow.
B is that pause to breathe. And then
Wow.
E is really about empathy and really
Mm.
about putting ourselves in our children's shoes, putting ourselves in the shoe of the other, right? And really understanding.
Wow.
And in, this situation, this example that I gave, she was just so excited about being able to share this toy at school
Yes.
and getting, making sure that I got to work on time was not on her priority list. Like she
Sure.
didn't care about that, right? Right. She was excited about sharing this toy. And so figuring out a way to then, kind of connect with her on that level and understand that she's just
Mm.
being excited, right? And how can we use that excited energy, right, to get us out the door so she can get to her school and share it, sooner rather than feeling like it's the obstacle because that's what was triggered, right? It was getting in the way of us being able to leave in the house. And so, my fight or flight grabbed it and threw it across the room.
Ooh.
So if we can empathize and slow down enough, again, in that
Mhm.
pause where we're breathing
Mhm.
and we're empathizing, we can
Yes.
shift the whole understanding of the situation in such a way
Correct.
that we can make some different choices. And
Oh,
so
I
I'll do
love
one
it.
more
Yes.
with the C. Yeah, since there's, we could talk about this for hours. The C is about
Yes.
that connection, right? And so finding
Yes.
the ways to get on that child's level through the empathy, right? As that kind of that gateway and through the breath,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
activating the system, the nervous system to work with
Mm-hmm.
us and not against us.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yes.
can then connect with where our child is at and aim for using all of our senses to help them, connect with what's happening and what's needed
Mm-hmm.
next, right? So if to go back to that situation, right, if I could do it
Yeah.
over, right, I would think and focus in less on the
Mm-hmm.
disconnect of like, trying to
Right.
get out of the door, but really more on the connection. I want you to share your toy too. Let's get it to the car because if the toys in the car, it's gonna get to
Yes.
school faster. So how can we get doggy, into
That's
the
right.
car super fast? Let's race. Let's see who's gonna get to the car first, right? And I
Exactly.
can use her motivation,
Yes.
right, to help us all get out of the house, in time.
Yes.
So that's just a little taste of it, and I'm happy
Mm.
to share more with families who are interested or who feel like this could be,
Correct.
beneficial for them
Oh,
at the
absolutely. I love it. Breathe,
Mhm.
empathize, and connect. And you don't even think about that stuff when you're dealing with kids.
Yes.
It's just amazing,
Yes.
right? We don't even think about that. Think about all, another adult or in a relationship, of course, but we don't even think how to tie that into children. But this is so, so important.
Yeah, and that's the beauty
So
of it. All of
important.
these strategies help all
Yeah.
relationships, right? It's not
Yes.
tied,
Oh, I love it.
exclusive to children, but you're right that these same principles help us in relationships, marriage, friendships,
Yes.
family tensions, right?
Yes. Yes.
If we can slow things
Yes.
down enough to take our 3 to 5 breaths. Right. And we've done that
Right.
ahead of time too, because that's the other piece of it is that so
Yes.
more happens
Hmm.
before and after the heated moment
Correct.
than during, right? Because during is really
Yes.
just about kind of helping to de-escalate the situation
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
work through it. But a
Hmm.
lot of the hard work happens before,
Before.
right? Because
And
you have to make sure that you've done enough of your own kind of breath work and your own control and your own mindful
correct.
awareness that you're even able, right, to choose to press your pause button when your
Yes.
child is in a moment as well. And they can be having a tantrum, they can be having a meltdown in the middle of the store because they didn't get
Uh-huh.
the candy that they wanted,
Uh-huh.
right, at the aisle. And if your bucket, right, is empty and you just don't have anything more to give, it's really hard to be able to empathize and try to connect with them in that mode.
Absolutely.
So we do a lot of work, outside of the heated moments in order to be ready for them.
Yes. Well, you have to be prepared for the storm before the storm
Mm,
comes.
yeah.
And this is the preparation ahead of time
Right.
before it gets to that point. But this is just really amazing work.
Mm,
Really taking that
thank
time
you.
to just pause and just taking that step back in the moment where you want to just, like you said, throw that thing across the room because that's what's aggravating me right now. It's not
Yeah.
even about that.
Mm,
It's about you being self-aware in the moment and
right.
stepping into your child's shoe, so to speak,
Right.
and realizing what's taking place. It's hard. That's work.
It is.
That's
It
work,
is. But
yes,
it's
but can
work.
be done.
It can be done, and it's so
Yes,
worth
can
it.
be done.
It's so
Yes.
worth it because, we were talking in the previous episode about
Mhm.
the example we set, right?
Yes.
And the modeling that
Yes.
we do.
Correct.
And we
Correct.
have this picture of what we want for our children, and we think that telling them, right, is the way that they're going to learn it. Lecturing them, right, yelling it at them is the way they're going to
Right.
learn it. But so much more is caught than
Yes.
taught when it comes to
Yes.
children,
I
right?
like
So
that.
much more is
Hmm.
caught than taught.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
really love that by doing the work, ahead
Yes.
of time,
Hmm.
I can be a different kind of example for them. And,
Yes.
over the years, my youngest, recently was like, Mommy, you're so calm. Thank you for being so calm with me when
Love
I'm,
it.
when I'm upset. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
even just
She-
from her from the mouth of babes, like she could tell the difference.
Yes.
She would not have said that I was calm when I was throwing stuff around the room, right? Having
She
mommy
sure
tantrums,
wouldn't.
right? And
Wow.
now, since I've worked so hard on the yelling, right, and the explosiveness, right, and the
Right.
nagging, right, and all of those things, it's a whole different energy in our
Wow.
relationship, in our home, and everybody feels the difference.
I
So
love
worth it.
that. Mom, you're so calm. I've never heard those words ever.
I know. I was like,
Ever.
wait,
'Cause I'm
say that
like,
again. Can I record
"Mom."
that? Right.
Yes. That means what you're doing is definitely showing up, and they're getting it, they're sensing, they're feeling it. That is amazing. So what Akua is referring to is her and I had an amazing podcast for her show, Moms Changing the World, prior to us doing this particular interview. And we talked a lot about moms and relationships and what we bring into the picture as parents and how that affects our children and the kids around us. And it's such a real and powerful thing because they do not grow up in a vacuum. They grow up in our chaotic homes. So we kind of have to know how to navigate that,
That's
but it
right.
starts with the parents first. Know how to navigate their own emotions. And then, of course, that gets translated down to the children, where her daughter can say, Mom, you're so calm. Even when I'm acting crazy. I love that. Never words never to be heard ever again. But you probably should have recorded that.
Right, right.
Because but it's amazing because it says that this works, that
Yes.
these tools work.
It does. One of the moms
These
that I
tools
worked
work.
with, she shared that she was out with her child and they were at an event. And, I think it was around the holidays. So all of the holiday madness was happening. The child, has some neurodiversity. So was very sensitive to all of that and
Yes. Hmm.
got frustrated when the little activity wasn't working. And she was able to use these strategies that we had been working on. Um, and she was able to keep her cool and not add to the chaos that was happening in that
Yes.
moment. And then she shared with me that another mother had seen the whole thing happen and gave her feedback at just how impressed she was at how she navigated that situation. So it's not just me. Like these principles and these
Amazing.
tools do work. And so that is
Yes.
one of the greatest joys, right, of this
Yes.
work is hearing and
Yes.
seeing the examples come back that where they're doing
Absolutely.
it and it's working and their
Oh.
children are better for it. It's being noticed in the
Mm-hmm.
community, in the circles where they
Mm-hmm.
are, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not the usual way that we're responding or that are even our
Correct.
culture or our stressors kind of lead us to respond. So
Absolutely. I wonder, how can you spread this around to, is this something that, I mean, I know you're in California and it's probably just like in
right.
your community, but how can this
Mhm.
be spread even outward? Because
Farther.
this is amazing. Really
Yeah,
is
yeah.
amazing work.
Well, what it's been really exciting because, during the pandemic, and it kind of goes into how Moms Changing the World came to be
Mm-hmm.
as a podcast and as part of my
Mm-hmm.
mission. I had listened to mom podcasts back when they started. As a new mom, I was commuting
Mm-hmm.
back then. And so
Correct.
back then, in the beginning of podcasting, 13, 14 years ago, there were only like 3 or 4 mom podcasts. There were not that many, but it felt like, coming up to the table with the 2 or 3 or 4 moms who were discussing the topics and with them
Mm-hmm.
in my ear or in my car, right? Just feeling like I was a part of that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that
Mm-hmm.
planted the seed to someday also be
Yes.
able to do a
Yes.
podcast and share my messages around, parenting and parent support and be calm. At the time, I didn't know it was going to be calm, but I had the seed planted.
Yes.
And so, yeah, of course, with the busyness of having young children and the career and all those things, it just didn't happen. But
Mm-hmm.
then, about a year before the pandemic, I had an experience where I was at church and I was there early. So I was kind of by myself, but I was basically just starting to, have a conversation with God and
Mm-hmm.
just felt impressed about getting these messages out and what my heart was for, and struggling though
Yes.
with, well, there's hundreds of thousands of podcasts, and so many about moms. Well, what's mine going to be?
Yes.
How's mine going to be different? And
Mm-hmm.
the idea about, thinking globally, thinking that,
Mm-hmm.
being from Ghana originally, and,
Mm-hmm.
many of us,
Mm-hmm.
have a different perspective if we've, lived or been in different
Yes.
countries, that we
Yes.
we all in our differences have so much that we share, and
Yes.
that we are raising the next generation, and we are changing the world by doing that.
Absolutely.
We can do
Mhm.
that in a very powerful and strategic way,
Yes.
or it can just happen
Yes.
around us and we can miss it. And so if we
Yes.
as moms own that we are changing the world,
Mm-hmm.
not only in our own voice and speaking out and sharing our own messages, but
Mm-hmm.
also through
Mm-hmm.
our children that we're raising to be
Mm-hmm.
world changers, then
Correct.
we can make this world a better place. And I just imprinted the name Moms Changing the World kind of came to me, and the idea
Yes.
that it would be interviewing other moms who are busy,
Yes.
changing the world, and other women who are doing incredible things. And so it
Yes.
really was born out of this pandemic shutdown that I finally had the time, and also the recognition that tomorrow is not promised. So if I think,
Yes.
I learned anything from the pandemic is that,
Yes.
we have this in some ways a false sense of security
Mm-hmm.
that things
Mm-hmm.
are always going to
Mm-hmm.
be the way that they are today. But in an instant, we saw that
Oh
everything
my
can
gosh.
change. It can be hard to get toilet paper.
Yes.
We
Yes.
we're not going to be allowed to leave our houses. I mean, like in a moment, right?
Yes.
Everything can change.
Yes.
So from that, I really knew that it was
Yes.
really not about, oh, someday, right? Because someday isn't promised, but it was about what can I do right now? What can I do
Wow.
today? And with
Yes.
everything being shut and slowed down and our calendars cleared,
Yes. Yes.
I said, now this is the time. And
This
I'm
is the
so glad I
time.
did, because
Oh,
that's how Moms Changing the World was born. And that's how I cemented, the Be Calm process and started the parent
correct.
coaching as well. So,
Wonderful. So a lot of, icky things happened during the pandemic, but a lot of
yeah,
good things were also
born of it
birthed
too. Yeah.
because a lot of us had that time to slow down. And the
Yes.
things that we were doing during that slowdown period, here we are several years later, is able to manifest that and put that forth. But this is absolutely amazing. And I hope that the
Yeah.
Be Calm, those tools can be spread
Yes.
even more outward because a lot of parents need
Yeah.
to hear this.
Absolutely.
We have to
And
be strategic about parenting. It's
we
amazing, but it's
do.
true.
We
It's
do. And
true.
so I was invited to be on some different platforms. And again, being online and virtual,
Yes. Yes.
there were different online conferences
Mhm.
that I speak at.
Yes.
And so I became a speaker as well in
Nice.
getting the message out. And so I continue to do that as well. And
Wonderful.
so yeah, I'm kind of on that mission, as you mentioned, to get the
Love
word out,
it.
because I am excited to come alongside, one
Yes.
mom at a time, one day at a time.
Yes. Love the fact that, at the end of the day, we're helping others. And it may not seem in the obvious way of lending a hand per se, but we're helping others on such a different level. And because of communication, because of, technology,
Yes.
it can be global.
Yep.
It
Yeah.
can
And I
be
work with
absolutely
families,
global.
yeah, all
Yes.
around the
You don't
country
have to, yes,
and
absolutely.
overseas.
Global.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because the message is still the same. It doesn't matter where you are in the world.
Right.
Parents are parents wherever you are in the world. But I
Exactly.
love the key here is learning how to be a parent in a very strategic way. Because you're from
Yes.
Africa, I'm from the Caribbean, and
Mm.
I know, I can speak for me. Ew. Woo. Yeah, they needed some of this be calm. When we were growing up, bro, it would have
Oh,
made a
yes.
big difference, right?
Oh, yes.
It would
Yeah.
have. But like we
Yeah.
said, even in the last podcast, that parents can only raise children based on what they
What they
themselves
know.
know.
Yeah.
So your kids
Yeah.
seeing this and they will mimic this,
Yeah.
hopefully, when they have their own families, which would be amazing. Calm
Yes.
parents when the kid is having a tantrum. Oh,
Right. It's like the opposite, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about some of the good things. Tell us a little bit about some of the difficult things that you have to
Sure.
manage in your day to day with a program like this.
Sure, sure. Yes. So, I'll start clinically, where it's, families are coming all the time. overwhelmed, worried
Mhm.
about their children, wondering, what's going on with my child, what's wrong with my child, right?
Mhm.
What do I need to do to help my child? Um, you know, be able to talk or communicate or
Mhm.
do well in school or
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
well in their relationships. And
Yes.
so it can be tough. As much as I love and enjoy the work,
Mhm.
it can be tough to come and face families, especially when,
Yes.
I think in an ideal world, an ideal system, I would be able to see the child, we would assess, we would get a clear diagnosis within,
Mhm.
a matter of a few weeks, if that. And then I would be
Mhm.
able to send them to this person for speech therapy, that person for occupational therapy, this
Mhm.
person for ABA. And they would all be able to start again within just a few short weeks, not months or
Right.
years,
Mhm.
as the actual case. We'd be in a very well coordinated system so that all of us could be communicating back and forth and being able to talk and make sure we're on the same page. And then I could also support the school program
Mhm.
and being, involved in helping create the school program so that it was tailored and customized to the child's needs. And there
Right.
would be, community classes and events and things happening all the time that were like the perfect fit for each child in each way,
Yes.
social groups and sports and all. In this ideal world,
Correct.
I could do all of those things, right, in
Mhm.
a very timely and streamlined fashion.
Mhm.
But as you can imagine, and probably in the way that I'm describing it,
Correct.
that's not the system that we have.
Correct.
It is a very like siloed system.
Mhm.
Everything happens in its own kind of bucket,
Yes.
for a
Yes.
variety of systematic reasons, from money to insurance to profit
Correct.
to
Mhm.
sustainability, like all there's all kinds of
Correct.
different reasons why.
Mhm.
But the reality is it's a very siloed system. And so I think one of the challenges that, I face is, how can we still help children be their best? How, despite that, how can we still support parents in the way that they need to be supported? How can we, still communicate and streamline and
Mhm.
coordinate
Mhm.
despite how, broken in many ways
Mhm.
our system is.
Yeah.
And so that I would say is one of the bigger challenges. And as far as
Yeah.
how I manage that,
Mhm.
is to really push and innovate. So
Mhm.
I'm the one that's, starting up the support groups, right, for my system.
Mhm.
I'm the one that's
Yes.
applying for and getting grants in order to,
Yes.
set up a parent mentorship program. So I
Mhm.
have to be that voice. If I see something that needs to be fixed or it's something that's a
Mhm.
gap, then I'm the one that has to stand up,
Yeah.
speak up, and make that happen. And so thankfully, I work in a system in the Bay Area that has been able to embrace that and work with that. And of course, it's time and it takes effort and it takes
Yes. Of
coordination and
course.
it takes a lot, but we are
Mhm.
on a journey towards being able to provide more
Yeah.
and more of these things, kind of
Mhm.
in-house. And then what I can't do right within a giant medical system, then
Mhm.
I do, in my own business and I do in my
Right.
own podcast, right? And so
Yes.
I figure out, what
Yes.
do I have control over, right? And then work within
Yes.
those, those
Mhm.
parameters. And so it's been such a great balance to
Yes.
have my own, platforms that I can share my own messages and,
Mhm. Absolutely.
coach and be involved with families in the ways that,
Mhm.
I, have gifts and talents to do. And that's
Mhm.
not easy either, right? Because there's like a business side to that as well. So
Correct.
that's
Correct.
the other
Correct.
juggle that you, I'm sure are aware of. And so,
Yes.
it's, I am constantly praying and constantly,
Yes.
aligning myself just with whatever it is that I can do
Mhm.
to, to be the vessel, to be the vehicle for these
Yes.
different things to happen and just trusting,
Yes.
that and that God meets me there every step of the way. And he opens the
Yes.
doors that I can't open for myself. He
Exactly.
orchestrates, the career path to
Yes.
position me right where I need to be. So I do
Yes.
give him the glory.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
Becomes bigger than us.
it's way bigger.
bigger than us.
Way bigger.
And but that's when you know it is destined. That's what
Yeah.
I found. That's when I know it's destined. And it's not even about you anymore. And that's when you know some of these paths has to be from God because it's bigger than you. With all of what's going on, you still enjoy it. You still want to help. You still want to do the best that you can and still enjoy it at the same time. So it does become bigger, so much bigger than who you are as a person. And sometimes people don't understand, well, how are you managing? Talk a little bit in coming up about self-care. How do you manage on all of this? And you're like, I don't even know. It has to be by the grace of God because I don't even know how I'm managing this with a family, with children, with a husband, with work, and all the hats that we're juggling. And it becomes this thing that we do. Never visioned earlier life, but now it's like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. I'm feeling satisfaction and I'm feeling joy. And we know it has to be a calling. It has to be a calling because there's no other way that we can be doing this if it wasn't. And it becomes so much bigger than we are. And that vision it becomes clearer and clearer. And more doors open because it's becoming clearer and more is being revealed to you that you are where you're supposed to be in this time. Because before had the pandemic not happened, it wouldn't be like this. It may have been something different, but it wouldn't be this. And because of that, this was birthed. And look where it's at. And look, you're literally changing the world. And we don't have to do this big, huge, miraculous thing to change the world. One little thing can change the world, and it's so beautiful. And we can change the world being ourselves, our unique self, and using our gifts and talents to do it
Yeah.
one step at a time, one day at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to
Absolutely
be
love
so
this.
patient with the
Yes.
process and the journey. And you're absolutely right that it's more and it's bigger than
It's
who,
bigger than
you
we
know.
are. Yes. I love it. Yes. Yes. Absolutely love it. So moving on, right? So talking about moms and our parents and their parents and everything else, the children that's coming up, the next generation. Are there lessons that you have gotten from your mom or your parents that you now pass on or have passed on to your children? Just a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I appreciated my mom so much more after becoming a mom. So
Mm-hmm.
something happened in that
Mm-hmm.
process of becoming a mother
Yes.
myself, right? Where I could
Yes.
now appreciate and understand in a whole different way than before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I love my mom. Fortunate to have a great relationship with her, even though
Awesome.
we didn't always see things eye to eye, right? And I felt like,
Yes.
I had to be perfect, to please, right? But we worked through a
Mhm.
lot of that. And even with becoming a mother, she was right there, for us in the whole process. She was there in the delivery room, and that that the transformation, I do feel like, made me appreciate her so much more, and our relationship so much more. And so it is, yeah, really a joy to think about, yeah, what of all the amazing things that my mom, shared and
Yes.
sacrificed and provided for me,
Yes.
can I
Yes.
pass along to my children? So, I do my first few episodes were with my mom for Moms
Mm-hmm.
Changing the World because I had to honor
Yes.
the mom that changed my world the most, right? My very own mother.
Absolutely.
So
Beautiful.
yeah, so you can hear a whole couple of episodes about that
Yes.
for the listeners who are interested. But some of the key points were that we can't do it alone. She is a people person, and so she was able to kind of show and model, right? And even in other countries, like it's just built in that,
Mm.
her mother came when I was born, her sister came to stay with
Yes.
us. We had, her
Mhm.
cousin, and then different people would
Yes.
rotate through. So motherhood for her in the beginning was
Mm.
like it was a joy because all she had to do was like feed me and change me if she wanted to because it hadn't been because everybody else was doing
Yes.
everything else, and
Mm.
she could just put her energy into me And she
Mhm.
was an entrepreneur. She had 3 or 4 different businesses, going
Wow.
herself, even as a young mom. And
Mhm.
so I definitely appreciate that even just our cultural setup, can
Mhm.
sometimes make it so that, we're postpartumly depressed and we're overwhelmed because it's just too much of a burden and
Yes.
expectation on any one or even 2 people.
Correct.
Right, if you have the mom and the dad,
Correct.
even that is wonderful to have, but it's
Mhm.
even bigger than that, to your
Mhm.
point from before.
Mhm.
So I think the idea of building your community, building your village, making sure to,
Mhm.
really, really have it such that you have all of those supports around you so that you
Mhm.
don't have to do it alone, because
Yes.
it's not possible to
Yes.
do it alone well. And kudos to all the single moms and the
Yes.
grandparents who are taking in kids and all
Mm.
of those, people, who are in that situation where so much of it
Mhm.
does fall on maybe one person. But even still,
Mhm.
there are neighbors, there are church members, right? There are
Yes.
cousins and aunties and uncles, and sometimes
Yes.
there's, yeah, people around, families, maybe people who don't have their own children, who would love
Correct.
to have some time with your children. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
I've
Ooh.
definitely made the effort to have a variety of
Mhm.
layers of support. As I mentioned, from the
Yes.
newborn days even to now, and our kids are fortunate to kind of grow up in the same school community. And so we've been
Mhm.
with a lot of their friends and their friends' parents since they were in preschool
Oh,
and
nice.
kindergarten. And so we are our own community where
Mhm.
if we need help with the pickup or a drop off or a
Mhm.
weekend, to get the
Yeah.
weekend date night, the kids can now get together and have fun
Mhm.
themselves with their
Yes.
other friends in that way. So it's that's one of the big things. And then
Yes.
I think, yeah, the other part of using your gifts and talents to bless others is the other thing
Yes.
that my mom
Yes.
taught me. She
Mm.
is a jack of all trades, and
I
I
love it.
looking at her, I felt like she could do everything. She could cook, she could bake, she could, she did almost so many jobs. She went back to school, later on, after we went to college to be an
Wow.
educator. So she got her master's in education, and so she was a teacher, and just and
Yes.
she sings and does everything, right? Like, so to me,
Yes.
like, she was kind of the model of the mom who does it all.
Yes.
And she does it
Mm.
all for others. She just
Mhm.
loves to do for
Oh,
others. And so
bless me.
I try to lean in and step into the gifts that I have, which some of them are similar, some of them are different, and that's okay, celebrating that, right? Because sometimes we can put pressure on ourselves to be
Mhm.
exactly like other people, or if I
Mhm.
don't do it like my
Mhm.
mom did it, then it's not good
Mhm.
enough, right? And that is false as well, right?
Mhm.
Those are
Mhm.
some false expectations that create stress that aren't there, that don't need to be there.
Mhm.
So really embracing that if I step into the gifts and
Yes.
talents and callings that are on my life, that I can do
Mhm.
and share for others in the ways that I was, made to.
Oh, well, you definitely, speaking of your mom, oh my gosh, because I lost my mom several years
Mm,
ago.
mm,
And just speaking of your mom and that relationship, and it just brings back a lot of
mm.
memories for me and my end as
Sure,
well. But I
sure.
can definitely see you have some of those traits. I'm gonna tell you the hustler mentality, just being a super
Mm,
mom,
mm,
almost. It
yeah,
seems like your mom. Just
yeah,
how did she do it?
I
And she just did
know.
it flawlessly.
It's that's what it
It's
seemed like. But
amazing.
as adults, we are able to talk now, and I can
Yes.
now hear, and we can now share that it wasn't always so easy, right? It wasn't
I
always so
bet.
perfect,
I bet.
especially as an immigrant, right? They had to come from another country to America with
Yes.
young children, learn this whole new
Yes.
system, learn this whole new way of
Woo.
doing things, and
Yes.
I just have so much respect for them in all
Yes.
that they did in order to
Correct.
do that, to give
Yes.
us the opportunities that we have today. So
Correct.
it may have looked easy, right, from our child perspective, because our parents are our
Yes.
superheroes, right?
Absolutely.
And they might
Absolutely.
have looked perfect, right? But as we get older, we
Yes.
can appreciate more and more of the
Yes.
fullness of the picture. And
Yes.
they also, raised us with faith, right? They had a
Yes.
faith
It's
in God,
important.
and they passed that
Yes.
on to me, and that's been so instrumental in
Yes.
everything that I do. And so in the
Mhm.
same way, my husband and I are sharing that and passing that along to our
Correct.
children. So
Yes.
It's a
Absolutely.
blessing to see the generations of blessing come
Yes.
forth from that.
Beautiful. Very well said. Very well. It's beautiful because we learn a lot from our mothers.
Mhm.
And for people that don't have a
Mhm.
mom or haven't grown up, I feel for them because I know there's so much that dads are amazing and they're great, but
Yeah.
women with our moms, there's something special about that they bring to the table that we
Yes.
can't get anywhere else. Especially at that
Yes.
very, very early stage again. So that's beautiful that the relationship does evolve,
It
either when you
does.
become an adult without
Mhm.
kids or just as a mom and it's like
Mhm.
you get it. If you have never
Yes.
gotten it, you get it like this. Oh my gosh, this is hard. How did
Right.
she deal with
How did
me
she
when
do all of
I was
this?
growing?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Whoa, you awake right
Yeah.
away because it's not easy.
Yeah.
Even though to
Yeah.
us, during those stages, it seems easy. A lot of them are struggling too.
Mm.
A lot of them are depressed or
Mm.
anxious or doing, whatever they have to do too, but yet they're doing it. So it's
Mm.
great to hear you talk about your mom like that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
You
you.
seem like an
Thank you.
incredible person. Yes. Yes. I love moms like that. Very encouraging. And yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Great
Oh, yeah.
example.
Oh,
Great
and then she's an
example.
author as well. I forgot to mention she's written children's books and then even yeah, adult books. Like
Wow.
just yeah,
Yeah.
just an inspiration all around. And so
I love
it's
it.
I love being able to
Yes.
yeah, to share and to
Yes.
grow in and have those things with my own children. That will
Yes.
always be things that we can
Yes.
keep from them. And so you're right, it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. It's gorgeous. Very, very beautiful. As we're winding down here, you're a busy professional. You're juggling your job, your podcast, family, children, navigating the clinic, all of it. How do you do you have time to even engage in hobbies? And if you do, what are they?
Mhm.
And what does self-care look like for you at this
Yeah,
point in your life?
yeah. So, one of the things that I had to do was yeah, figure out how to take care of myself in the juggle of everything and
Mhm,
with the
mhm.
physical pain and the transitions and all those things. I had to
Yes.
figure out, ways to make sure that I was taking care of me. And so for me, exercising and moving is tied very closely to dance. I love to dance.
Yes.
And so I
Oh,
started doing Zumba back in those days.
yes.
And then for me, because I love to teach and I love to share, I became an
Yes.
instructor not only for adults, but also there's a mother baby parent child Zumba called Zumbini. I don't do as much of that
Interesting.
anymore. Yes, but again, it was really like leaning into, right, ways that
Yes.
I can not only move and have fun and be,
Hmm.
fit for myself, but again, how can
Correct.
I share that with others? So
Hmm.
now I
Yes.
mainly do the Zumba instruction, and because we have online, that's given us a way to continue that. And
Yes.
where logistically right now, just be with all the other things in my life, it would be hard to
Hmm.
teach a lot of classes in person. I'm able to
Correct.
teach virtually for my work and
Yes.
for friends, and then
Yes.
my in-person time is actually with like I would say elementary to young adults with special needs, because I
Okay.
can kind of bring together the kind of playful Zumba and exercise
Yes. Yes.
foundation in with the actual like strict choreography, right? It has
Yes.
to be a little bit adapted, so I can we can adapt it that way for them,
Correct.
on a quarterly basis. So
Yes.
I've had to, yeah, figure out what are the ways that I can make sure that I'm moving, right, and exercising for
Correct.
myself that don't feel
Correct.
like a burden. It feels like a dance party every time I do
Yes.
Zumba,
Love it.
right? And by doing that, and then by teaching and making that commitment to teach, it
Yes.
challenges me to be accountable, right? To make sure that
Yes.
I'm learning the new routines and I'm incorporating them in safe ways
Hmm.
and just continuing to have fun, doing that with myself
Yes.
and others. And it's been fun to have my kids kind of come along with me and do some of those
Yes.
classes. And so
Yes.
I, tried to make it some times where it could be something we do together. And now virtually sometimes because I'm teaching at home, sometimes they'll hop in and they'll, be my assistant
Yes.
for for a little bit.
Love
So
it.
being flexible has also helped with that. And then when it comes to kind of my strategy
Hmm.
for making sure that I'm filling my own cup. And the analogy I
Mm-hmm.
like to use is of a pot. When
Mm-hmm.
you make a really good, rich pot of stew, it has,
Mm-hmm.
layers, it has thyme, it has
Mm.
all this real goodness in it. And we want to serve it and we want to give it to everybody who comes.
Yes.
And a big pot
Yes.
can feed a lot of people. But if we don't
Mm-hmm.
take time to like, replenish or to, make a new batch or make a new
Mm-hmm.
stock, and we keep trying to,
Mm-hmm.
give out of this pot, it eventually runs out, right? We're going to get to the bottom bitsies, right? And nobody wants the burnt bitsies at the bottom. And so it's one of those
Mm.
things where I have to think, okay, I'm getting a little low on the vegetables here. Like, what can I do,
Yes.
right, to boost up the vegetables? Or I need some
Yes.
rich relaxation broth. Maybe I need a spa. And so I had to think about
Yes.
what I can do every day, right, to make sure
Yes.
that I have a foundation of mindfulness and I'm in
Mm-hmm.
present in the moment through
Mm-hmm.
prayer and meditation and then
Mm-hmm.
gratitude. And at the end of the day, at the dinner table with the kids or before bedtime, we're talking about what we're grateful for. We're having, some of that reflection time. What was
Yes.
and a tip that we like to do is, what was your rose of the day, the highlight of your day? What was the
No.
thorn of the day, the hard part, the sticky point of the day? And was your bud? What is your bud? The little hope, the inspiration for tomorrow or this
Mm-hmm.
week or this month,
Mm-hmm.
or what's
Mm-hmm.
giving you hope to go on. And so,
Yes.
we'll incorporate those things, on a regular
Wow.
basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's things that I do every week, or every other week, right? I, make sure the nails get done and
Mm-hmm.
make time to do the hair, and then even getting
Yes.
help with cleaning, right? That's not my favorite job in the world, and so I do what I have to do. But if I get blessed to be able to have cleaners come and help do the heavy lifting, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
frees up
Absolutely.
time for me to do other things. I've adapted
Yes.
my schedule so that I have one day in the week where I don't see patients, so that I can have some flexibility to make sure that I'm
Yes.
taking care of me and my family, and we're able to go to some of the games for the kids, right? And have
Mm-hmm.
lessons and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And then, we're at church every week. And that is kind of a
Mm-hmm.
family fuel up time for
Mm-hmm.
me,
Mm-hmm.
to not only have some special, connected time with God, but to be in the company of
Yes.
my church family,
Yes.
which,
Yes.
having stayed in the same church community since my single days, since the days I met Peaches, our friend that hooked us up.
Yes.
They are like another family to me, because they've been in my life, many of them, some
Mm-hmm.
of them since before my husband and I got married, and before we had kids. So there's a knowing there, right, of
Mm-hmm.
who I
Mm-hmm.
am, who we are,
Mm-hmm.
and they've helped us become, who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
and then the vacations and the sprinkling of things that can't happen every weekend, right? Or every day,
Yes.
right? But I make sure that the date nights and
Mm-hmm.
those kind of things happen for the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we talk more about that in your episode as
Yes.
well, if people want more on that.
Yes.
But then singing
Yes.
would be my other hobby. And so I love singing on
Mm.
the worship team at church. I love doing the children's
Oh,
choir for our church. And so that's another thing I get to do kind of with my kids. And now that they're
yes.
getting older, they're on the worship team, the youth worship team, with me as well. So it's been a journey of really just making sure, to develop the gifts and skills that God has given me, the gifts and talents and opportunities, volunteering, right? If something's not happening, saying, let me help make that happen, or let me help keep that going, right? Whether it's Sunday school or the children's
Mm-hmm.
choir.
Mm-hmm.
And because I love doing it, right? The singing or the dancing, it like
Correct.
you had mentioned, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like a burden, right? As I've made sure to set the boundaries on it so that I can, have the bandwidth to do each of those things well,
Mm-hmm.
at a
Mm.
level that not only blesses myself, but blesses others.
Oh, woman, I don't know how you do it. Whoa, yes. It's a blessing. It's a
Mhm.
blessing because you do a lot and
Mhm.
you give a lot. The more you give is the more you receive. And if it's just receiving strength,
Mhm.
to continue to do it
Do it. Yeah,
is such a big blessing.
it
But I love
is.
the fact that
It
you
is.
incorporate, your family, your
Yeah.
children. I love
Yeah.
the gratitude piece. I love that. Even at a young age, we need to know what we're thankful for. We
Yeah.
need to know what we are gracious for. It's so beautiful because then you look around the world and you see what's happening.
Yeah.
We have to understand how blessed and how fortunate we are in any given moment. And for them to reflect that, I love that piece. Just
Mm.
reflected on the thorn of the day, the rose. I love that. The way you broke that down, I love that. Because
Yeah.
they need to know.
Yeah.
They need to know. Because
Yeah.
you said earlier, tomorrow is not promised to anyone. It can all change like
Exactly.
this. And you need to know
Exactly.
today what you're thankful for. So I
Mm.
love that. And it just the giving. The more you give, the more you receive. Just keep giving. Just keep
Mhm.
giving of yourself.
Yeah.
Whether it's volunteer, we all can give. We all can do
Right.
that part,
Right.
right? It's just
Right.
about, again, prioritizing, right?
Right.
Pouring into yourself. Because when you're giving to others, you're pouring into you. You said it before,
Yeah.
you're pouring into you. I'm doing this because from my heart is what I want to do. I'm blessing someone, but it's coming back to me. It's pouring into me as well.
Yeah.
And there's just something about
Yeah.
that you can't explain it unless you're actually doing it. Something about it that's so
Mhm.
rewarding.
It
That's so
really
rewarding. So I just love
is.
that. Loving the self-care. We gotta take care of ourselves because when the pot is empty, like you said, nobody wants those burnt bits on the bottom. We want a fresh pot full of all that
Exactly.
nice ripe
Goodness and
vegetables and
flavor.
we
Yeah.
don't want the burnt peas. And women,
Mhm.
as women, as moms, we have to understand that we gotta pour into ourselves.
Mhm.
We give and we give and we give, and we're depleted, and no one is pouring back into us. But we got to take that time to pour into ourselves. So
Mhm.
I love the fact that you have that routine set up because I got to pour into me. How am I
Mhm.
supposed to do all of these
Mhm.
things that I'm doing, all
Mhm.
20 things plus, you're doing a lot, right? If I'm
Right.
depleted, you can't do
Right.
it. It's
Right.
impossible.
Right.
It's impossible.
Right.
Otherwise, you just suffer. And that's not the point of suffering. You're supposed to be
Right.
doing it and be joyous while you're doing it. But because you are
Absolutely.
pouring into you and taking the prioritizing time to do so, that's what I'm seeing.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Oh my gosh. We
Mm.
are definitely winding down.
Yes.
Ekua, is there anything else you would like to leave our guests with today before we wrap up?
Sure. Um, yes, I think, to kind of wrap up the and connect to this point, um, I want, what women to take away is that, or anybody who's listening, you are
Yes.
enough. Like you are
Yes.
more than enough. And
Ooh.
I know sometimes it can be like, oh, well, but I don't sing, and I don't teach Zumba and I don't work with children. The comparison game gets us nowhere. You
Exactly.
have gifts and talents that God has given you to do, right?
Mhm.
You might be able to
Yes.
whip up a
Mhm.
meal like nobody's business, right? And somebody out there is hungry,
Mhm.
right? You
Mhm.
might be able to
Yes.
turn an idea into a story, right? That
Yes.
somebody needs to hear. And so
Yes.
I think
Yes.
um I think comparison can often creep in and we
Correct.
try to we take away from what we're supposed to do by trying to do what somebody else is doing. And
Correct.
I've been guilty of this myself where it's like,
Mhm.
oh,
Mhm.
I can look at my mom or a sister or a friend and say, but they do
Mhm.
this so well, and I can't do
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I may not have been meant to do that. I've been meant to do things a slightly different way, or I have
Mhm.
other gifts and talents
Mhm.
that
Yes.
come more
Yes.
naturally to me. And
Mhm.
so,
Yes.
I am a believer in what you were saying about how what we give kind of comes
Mhm.
around and that there's
Mhm.
a cycle. And I think some
Mhm.
of the mental health challenge that
Mhm.
some of us are experiencing around anxiety and depression,
Mhm.
and is about isolation and
Uh-huh.
not doing and not
Mhm.
being and
Mhm.
getting closed off into this world
Mhm.
of like I can't do this or I don't like this or I don't feel this. And again, not to not it's not, this isn't a judgment or a blame game or
Mhm.
anything like that, because
Mhm.
there's definitely neurochemicals and biochemicals and genetics. There's so many
Yes.
factors Of
Yes.
course, I'm not trying to minimize or downplay any of that,
Mhm,
but if you look at like the research and the evidence around
mhm. Yes.
service,
Yes.
volunteering,
Mhm. Yes.
giving,
Yes.
generosity, it's all tied to the
Mm.
healing that
Yes.
and the mental health renewal
Yes.
that most of us, many of us are seeking. So
Yes.
if anybody is struggling right now and
Mhm,
it's like, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that or I can barely do this or I can barely do that, know that you're enough.
mhm.
Know that
Love it.
you are more than enough, just the way
Yes.
you are. And by taking one
Yes.
step forward and the next step forward, you can even become more and better
Mhm. Yes.
um,
Ooh,
version of
yes.
yourself. And
Yes.
only you can do
Yes.
that. Nobody can do that for
Mm.
you. You have to decide that you are going to take this moment, because again, that's all we have,
Mhm.
to do the next right thing or the next best thing, right?
Yes.
And that often
Oh.
comes out of, right,
Mhm.
finding that connection point,
Mhm.
coming out of
Yes.
isolation,
Yes.
looking, what can I do instead of waiting for what somebody can do for me or how somebody can fix me? What can I do for
Yes.
somebody else? What
Yes.
am I gifted to do? How am I gifted to show up to make a difference?
Yes.
And trust me, there's people around waiting for that. They need that.
Absolutely.
And because you're
Oh.
not giving it to them, they're missing out. The world is missing out. And so
Oh.
I hope that encourages somebody, because I
Yes.
know the more I have embraced that for myself,
Yes.
the richer
Yes.
my life has become. And the
Ooh.
balance of it all has
Mhm.
lightened and has eased up, right? Even
Yes.
though there is a lot going on,
Mhm.
I don't feel the stress and the burden
Yes.
that I used to feel when I was busy comparing myself or busy kind of undermining
Mhm.
myself, right?
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
what was meaning
Yes.
myself, right? Because it wasn't
Yes.
enough. It wasn't like somebody else, or I didn't look like somebody else, or I didn't,
Mhm.
sing like
Mhm.
somebody else, or whatever it was.
Yes.
I have
Ooh.
really like felt the freedom
Yes.
and the joy, as you mentioned, and the
Mhm.
calm and peace in
Yes.
linking up, partnering with God, knowing that
Mhm.
with God, I can do all things that I'm supposed to do, not what she's supposed to do or he's supposed to do, what I'm
That's
supposed to
right.
do.
Ooh.
And
Yes.
nothing can stand
Yes.
in the way of that, except for me.
Wow.
If I
Except
decide
for
I'm just
you.
gonna, yeah, if I'm gonna just,
Ooh.
get in the bed and hide, then none of it can happen. So I hope that encourages
Wow. Oh
someone
my
to take
gosh.
that step.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I could not have said it better myself.
yeah,
You are more than enough.
yeah.
We all have gifts and talents, and a lot of times we don't know what they are because we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could be just trial and error. I'm good at
Right.
this, but I'm not good at that. I'm good
As
at
good
this,
as
but
that.
I'm not.
Yeah,
That's okay.
it's
Just start.
okay.
Just start some.
Somewhere. Yes.
Because the one thing I know is there is no shortage of volunteers, honey. I don't care what aspect you go in, they will say yes.
That's
Can you
right.
see, can I help you
That's
here?
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can always do something somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, just start
Yeah.
wherever you are. Because
Start
a lot of
wherever
times
you
we
are.
don't know until we start doing it. Oh, this seems like
Right.
fun. I'll try it. Oh, this is not for me. Okay, I'll try something else. It's all good.
Yeah.
Trial and error, but
It
do
is.
something. And again, there's no more the bigger joy and
Yeah.
reward
Yeah.
than giving of yourself and not
Yeah.
expecting anything in return.
That's right.
There's
That's
something
right.
about that.
It
Something about that.
is.
And
It
unless you
is.
do it, you won't know. So we're trying to
Right.
say, do it.
Get up
Do
and do
it.
it.
Please do it. Go on and
That's
do
right.
it. Go
That's
do
right.
it. Because yes, people
Mhm.
are out there waiting for whatever it is that you have to give. And you don't
Exactly.
even know that, but they are.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
absolutely love it. Oh my gosh. Akua, this was so, so, so amazing. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Guys, we are going
I'm
to
so
have all
honored.
of her contact information
Yes.
um in the description. And like I said, her and I did a previous podcast interview.
That's
So
right.
once that comes out, I'll definitely share a link on this platform as well. So you
Yes.
guys can have
Yes.
that. And that'll be her in her domain and me out of mine, but all
That's
good.
right. That's right.
We had an amazing time doing that as
Yes.
well as doing this one. So I just thank you so much for your expertise and just for taking your time and for coming on here, busy as you are, and joining
Mm,
us here for this interview. And it has been, oh my gosh, so informative, so
yeah.
informative. And I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and I love what you're doing here. Love this, platform, this community, and you do it so well. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Guys, if you haven't already subscribed and liked to the channel, please go ahead and do so. And once again, thank you so much for watching. Have yourself an amazing rest of the day. And I will see you guys in the next episode. See you later. Thank you. Bye for now.